Ciao Sergio, buongiorno.
Ciao, buongiorno. Appena sono uscito dall'altro webinar.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anna Maria Di Giorgio. I'm the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in San Francisco, and I'm very glad to be here with you today and welcome to the 6th annual week of Italian cuisine in the US. Benvenute, benvenuti. This year's theme is Tradition and Perspectives of Italian Cuisine, Awareness and Enhancement of Food Sustainability. All the events of the week are made possible thanks to the local efforts of the Consulate General of Italy in San Francisco, our honorary consulates network, the Italian Cultural Institute in San Francisco, Accademia Italiana della Cucina, with the support of Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation and the Embassy of Italy in Washington, D.C. Today's event is entitled Tasting Tuscany, from Brunello to the Bounty of Tuscan Cuisine, and you're going to listen soon to food and wine expert Leslie Rosa and master winemaker David Cilli for a lively look at the splendors of Brunello and the traditional Tuscan foods and flavors that pair perfectly with it, and also to celebrate the recent sister cities of Napa and Montalcino. So before starting, I'm very glad to leave the floor to our Consul General Sergio Strozzi for a greeting. Thank you so much, Consul Strozzi, for being here with us today. Grazie, Sergio.
Grazie Anna Maria, grazie direttrice. Thank Director Anna Maria Di Giorgio of the Italian Culture Institute in San Francisco for organizing this beautiful event. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you. I thank all the partners, Director Anna Maria Di Giorgio has just mentioned, for organizing this Tasting Tuscany, from Brunello to the Bounty of Tuscany Cuisine, and the celebration of the Montalcino and Napa Sister Cities program. The first thing I would like to stress out and to underline with you is that there's no better moment to celebrate Montalcino and Brunello than right today, because we are just coming from having signed October 15th the agreement between the sister cities of Napa and Montalcino. So today's event is the first event we are having after this great moment, which has been, strengthened the relations between two strategic wine production areas, internationally recognized and so famous worldwide. And we are so glad as Italian government to spread the knowledge about this agreement we've been signing, because it's not only let's say bureaucratic or administrative agreement between two cities. It's also about culture of wines, culture of food, sustainable production, sustainable food, which is the theme we are tackling and addressing with our event. And it's also about modern fields and issues like technology applied to wine production. This means that the agreement has to work in all these fields and to strengthen the relations between the two areas, not only from a strictly agricultural and wine producing point of view, but also from cultural point of view, to strengthen the relations between the two communities of Napa and Montalcino, and also from an economic point of view, that it could be very important to have a stronger cooperation in the future in the wine production industry and sector, but also in other fields. Let me say that we couldn't celebrate the agreement of the sister cities of Montalcino and Napa and the Brunello better than having two experts like Leslie Rosa and David Cilli. So I will stop here my welcome and introductory speech. I leave the floor again to Director Anna Maria Di Giorgio, thanking her for hosting me, for having me, and thanking our two experts for being with us today. Thank you so much. Grazie a tutti.
Grazie, Sergio. Thank you very, very much for granting us with your participation today. And so coming back to our webinar, Leslie Rosa, after a decade of working in the art world for eminent institutions and artists in New York and London, Leslie moved to Italy. She fell in love with Italian wine and became a certified sommelier through the Associazione Italiana Sommelier, and she created La Dolce Vigna in response to the large impersonal tours she came across while living in Italy. So her passion is to provide clients with curated tours and itineraries in which each day tells a story and offers an in-depth look at the history and culture of a particular region. When she's not leading tours in Italy, California, or Argentina, you can find Leslie sharing her knowledge at pop-up wine tastings, writings for slow foods, wine guide, or getting lost somewhere beautiful. Lucky her with her watercolor set. So Leslie has also a website, www.ladolcevigna.com. David Cilli was born and raised in Tuscany, and he developed a deep appreciation for vineyards, wines, and cuisine of the region from a young age. An internship in a local cellar revealed his passion for making wine and inspired him to pursue a degree in viticulture and enology in Florence. And he then began working in various wine cellars across Montalcino and Tuscany and learning about the commitment to purity by small local family producers. And he admired the thread of patience and multi-generational approach to wine growing. He went on to accept winemaking internship in Italy, Australia, France, Argentina, and this is where David began to understand the different approaches to farming and winemaking, which have helped develop his actual vision. So since 2012, Harvest, he has lived in Napa and he's been fully dedicated to promontory wine. And in his free time, he loves to cook and cycle in the Napa Valley. You can also look on the website of Promontory. That's www.promontory.wine. So now I give the floor to David Cilli. Thank you very much, David, for being with us today.
Thank you, Anna Maria, and thank you, Sergio, for the brief introduction to this sister ship that, is something that I wasn't thinking about. Something that came out like one day out of nothing, right there where you are sitting, Sergio, with your predecessor,
Lorenzo.
Yeah. With Lorenzo, we were always talking about wine and food, and so he with also my wife Flavia, we were there thinking what we could do to kind of create this link, this bridge between such a beautiful place as Napa Valley and Tuscany. So the idea, there were many ideas at the beginning. And the one that me and Flavia, most liked was the one to create this partnership between the Napa Valley and the Val d'Orcia, which is also like a UNESCO heritage site. So it's like two of the most beautiful valley in the world. But the only issue that actually Lorenzo brought to the table because of his experience is to put at the table such a 20, 30 mayors from different towns would have been impossible to have everybody agree and stuff like that. So the idea was, let's start from 2 points. And then we can open up to all the neighbors. This is one thing that talking with the two mayors, it seemed evident. This is not just the city of Napa or the city or the town of Montalcino, but will be open to the whole Napa Valley and maybe the Bay Area and San Francisco, and for the Tuscan side, maybe for the whole Siena area, including Val d'Orcia. Why not even bigger? So we can dream a lot about this, but so at the beginning we're gonna start from this and then we'll see. And depending on, how everything will move on. But I'm also very excited because as Sergio said, one of the kind of first kind of points that both of the parties agree with is this educational aspect. So I studied in Siena in the kind of a high school specialized in agriculture that now has a section in Montalcino focusing on the viticulture in the area. So I would have loved to have this opportunity. So that I think is the idea, to create this link between these two beautiful areas and be able to exchange students and the young workers. They can learn from each other. They can bring back a lot of experience, a lot of different point of view. I'm the first student because I started working in Montalcino when I was 17, doing the first internship with high school and then during college. And now the last one was my 10th harvest here in the valley. So I see the beauty of both of the parties, and I see where both can learn from each other. And we see, because I think it's very promising. And then another aspect is the actual being two amazing, beautiful place, rich of culture, actually multicultural, but with such a diverse route. I think it's going to be very interesting, this exchange between the actual culture and that then brought to kind of make wine and interpret wine in different ways. Because, I mean, in general, Napa and Montalcino, they seem pretty different, and in some aspects they are, but there are also a lot of object and a lot of things in common. So both they are reference, they are wine references for their country. And I always like to compare Napa as it's a small pocket of Tuscany in US, because I always said that in particular Promontory for me is the only area where I could have worked outside of Tuscany. So I feel this thing very, very strongly. But I'm gonna share now my screen, and so we can. I wanna compare a little bit the two territories and a little bit the numbers, and without getting too boring, and yeah, few pictures and briefly mention about Montalcino. Let's see. Sorry. So this is just two pictures to kind of show that how different they are, but how at the end similar on the intent and the cooperation and the things they wanna apply there. So here are kind of two maps. The one on the left is the municipality of Montalcino. The one on the right is Napa Valley. As you see, the city of Napa is down here on the south. And I wanted to have this map because when we talk about wine, in Montalcino and we talk about Brunello, it's basically everything delineated in the municipality of Montalcino. Nothing outside of the municipality can be denominated or called as Brunello or Rosso di Montalcino or others, where Napa is the Napa Valley area, is the Napa County, and it basically included other 5 or 6 more municipalities that they are subdivided in 16 AVA, 16 areas, kind of a 16 small appellation. And as the morphology and the geography of the two areas that is quite distinct. Montalcino you have to imagine this like hillside, this hill with the town of Montalcino on top of it. And the vineyards basically that they all around down the hill. And where Napa is this like kind of a small tongue of land, a small valley that goes from kind of a southwest to southeast to northwest for about 30 miles, around 50 kilometers. And it's basically, this valley is surrounded by, is shielded by two different mountain ranges. Mountain ranges, they kind of protect, and they protect kind of the valley, and they go up to, I think, 26, 28 under feet, where a Montalcino goes up to 2,400, if I remember well. But I mean, let's move to this. This is not very beautiful slide, but I think there are a lot of interesting and curious information. So just to compare, so Montalcino has almost 6,000 people living there. And actually the city of Napa has 79,000. And the whole Napa Valley has 137,000. The surface, as you can see, it's about like 6 or 7 times bigger Napa. And the part of the vineyards is about 5,000 more. But the interesting things is related to the number of wineries, which is Montalcino, being much smaller, has in proportion more wineries. And this mainly due to two things. One, of course, the size is smaller, but what happened in Napa that doesn't happen in Montalcino is in Napa there are still a lot of farmers. So there are still a lot of growers that produce only grapes. And there are also projects or wineries that they don't own any grapes, but is everything like rented, right? Where in Montalcino, I want to say is a little bit more old school. So I want to say the majority, if not all of it, they own his own vineyard, and they farm and they cultivate their vineyards. Of course, there is a little bit of a market for like bulk grapes, but I want to say it's like a minor percentage. So this is why I think the numbers, they seem a little bit different. And the altitude, Napa goes from basically sea level, because the south part, like Carneros, is basically finishing in the bay. And on the side, it goes up to 2,600 feet, which is about 800 meters. Where Montalcino, it starts around 150 meters, 300 feet, and it goes up to 2,100, and I think is 660 in meters, the highest part of Montalcino. I think another interesting thing is like the latitude. Latitude of Montalcino is 43rd parallel, which is in California, in the West Coast. It's between basically the border of California and Portland. It's kind of in the south area of the Oregon, where Napa is the 38th parallel, which in Italy is the northern part of Sicily. So, but even if there is this different in latitude, the interesting things, they are both considered Mediterranean climate, because Napa, their proximity to the ocean, there is a lot of this like mitigation from the ocean, and is what basically brings the the fog, the cool air, the one that mitigate kind of that strong warm energy that comes from inland, where it's basically desert. So Napa is this like subtle, this small area with a very delicate balance between the cold mass of air coming from the ocean and the warm mass coming from the desert, more like from the east. But at the end, I think another interesting thing is if you see that here, the rainfalls are basically exactly the same. And why Napa is considered dry Mediterranean instead of regular Mediterranean is because the rainfall is actually concentrated basically in winter from December to March. And then there are we can have like here very few rainfall event like in November or maybe April, but that's pretty much it. Where Montalcino, winter, autumn can be a little bit more rainful, but every year we're gonna have rain in spring and summer. So, and I think this is, I'm probably opening like a too big of an argument about talking about like global warming. What for me, from my point of view, what has become like very difficult is the predictability of these events. So we can have like a very dry summer, even in Tuscany, but also we can have a very wet summer, where in the past it wasn't like that. But we are seeing something like this in Napa as well. In Napa, basically, like 2 years ago, we had 2.5 inches of rain in June, which is super unique, and everybody was a little bit worried, where also can manifestate with more like frequent heat spell. So the heat spell in Napa, they seemed to be more frequent than in the past. And going back to Montalcino, the Sangiovese is the king of Montalcino. Is the only is the solist, is the only interpret of the magic hill. And it started with the Sangiovese Grosso, like this clone with like bigger berries, a tighter cluster, and like with time, with all the producers and actually producers in Tuscany, they cooperate and work to create and to find like a little bit looser clusters, a little bit what is called now like Sangiovese, without the specification of grosso, that means like big. So smaller berries, better ripening, more like homogeneous ripening. So slowly is actually probably evolving also the character of the wines from like the one that we make today. They were not the wine that we used to make in the 50s or the 60s. And but the characteristic of the Sangiovese that is a very I don't know if it exists this word in English, a chameleontic protagonist. So it's very transparent. It's very it's not super, it doesn't have a big ego, so it's very humble, so very frequent, is able to transmit and transpire the character of the land where it's growing. So you can find so many different facets of Sangiovese, changing from the different sides of Montalcino and Tuscany as well, because it's the main variety in Tuscany, but also respect a lot how it's been treated by the producer, probably more than many other varieties. So is a variety that expresses very well the character of the land and the approach of his like owner or the guy or the man that managed that piece of land. And in particular, like I'm gonna talk about, Montalcino has became famous in the 16th century. So became famous. It was famous in the 16th century, not for the production of red wine. It was famous for the production of Moscadello di Montalcino, which is a sweet wine made out of Moscato grapes. That now there are only few wineries producing that, but at the past it was kind of was the ambassador of Montalcino, and it's like later in the 1800 where basically was introduced more the red grapes, the Sangiovese cultivation, and until the first label of Brunello was 1888, and many things has happened, and in 1996 actually was the formation, the foundation of the Consorzio del Brunello di Montalcino, with only 25 producers at the table. And I like to go back to Napa for a little bit, because there is an interesting relation between Napa and Montalcino on this side, because kind of in those years, in the 50s, 60s, is when both of them kind of swap gear, and they decided to become a real wine region and be focused more on the production of high-end wines. And because in Napa, for example, in 1879, there used to be 170 wineries, which I wasn't believing today, right? But then between Fillossera and the prohibitionism and a huge recession in 1950, there were only 29 wineries in the whole Napa Valley. So I like to compare these two moments. For Montalcino, the foundation of the Consorzio del Brunello di Montalcino, and for Napa, kind of this a rebirth from scratch. And and here we are today. They're both representing kind of the top of their area. But going back to Brunello di Montalcino, sorry if sometimes I lose the path. But so basically, as I said earlier, the Brunello di Montalcino, any wine of Montalcino, can only be made in the municipality, in the border of the municipality of Montalcino. There is only one interpret, which is Sangiovese, and the maximum yield is 8 tons per acre. That it's about hectare, sorry. For the Americans is about max 3.5 tons per acre. And the requirement that needs to age at least 2 years in oak, and at least 4 months in bottle, 6 months for the Reserva. So that these are kind of a general rules, so that in this like 5 years of aging the Brunello has, every producer can adapt their like aging process, aging path, depending on the characteristic of their wines. And basically it's going to be released in January of the 5th year after the harvest. Another main protagonist of Montalcino that is less famous than the Brunello, and it's also like in a smaller amount. If I'm not wrong, the amount the total amount of the vineyard of Montalcino, like around 60% is Brunello, and only 15% is Rosso di Montalcino. So Rosso di Montalcino is a wine still 100% Sangiovese, and more or less has like, sorry, I missed a number. The maximum yield is like 9 tons per hectare, which is a little bit more than 4 tons per acre. And this is with the idea of also make a wine more approachable, a wine that needs to be, can be ready earlier, but at the same time still breathe and transpire the character of Montalcino. And actually, I drink a lot of Rosso di Montalcino. And yeah, this is like, you know, it's also like worth for the producers to be able to sell something earlier without have to wait 5 years from the production, basic from the harvest. So help them also economically. But I know that there is always more and more attention in the Rosso from all the producers and the consortio. So I really look forward to see how the Rosso will evolve, and which, like, if it's going to raise his position on the market. And there are other two wines, made in Montalcino, which one is one that I described earlier, is the Moscadello di Montalcino, and one is the Santantimo. Santantimo is the, you know, the Santantimo is still red, but it's not only Sangiovese, they are also open to other international varieties. So it's a wine that earlier is like rounder, more approachable, a little bit richer. So it's interesting because even using international varieties, you still feel this like tension, this character, the focus, and this like wild herbs that Montalcino has. And then, you know, there is this the Moscadello di Montalcino, which is this like sweet wine, kind of a late harvest, super good, super delicious, and actually is becoming very, very rare to find, because like no many producers still do it. And I think now I have just a panoramic of kind of the 4 different sides of Montalcino. And remember that Montalcino is this hillside. This is kind of a northeast slope. It's kind of an area, there is here more sedimentary, there is a little bit more clay, more limestone. Some area is a little bit sandier. It's considered a little bit cooler, given kind of this like northeastern aspect. This is kind of the area next door, still kind of enjoying a little bit the less sun, so a little bit cooler. But in this area, the soil is a little bit similar. But you know, Montalcino, talking about soil, Montalcino is very difficult, because you have to imagine this hill that was basically I want to say inundated with the sea multiple times in his story. So we have kind of the rockier soils on the top of the hill, and basically what the sea did, like going back and forward, was like bringing new material every time. So, but not every time it was reaching the same level. So there is kind of this layering of different things. And also another consequence of this like inundation of the sea that basically cause many slides. So there are areas that basically slide down, and sliding, they kind of mixed all the layering together. So it's actually very difficult to classify and to say, oh, this is this. There are areas very, very complex. And this is kind of the southeastern part facing the Monte Amiata. Is kind of the highest mountain that we have in the southern part of Tuscany, and kind of that helps to protect also Montalcino from turbulences or stuff coming from that direction. The southwestern slope is more like a sedimentary. There is lots of clay, sand. You can also find pockets of metamorphic rocks. It's slightly warmer, and the wines here in general are a little bit rounder. Probably you can find some wine more approachable earlier compared to the north area. But I always, honestly, I don't like to generalize a lot on the character. It's difficult because every producer interprets in a different way. So you can find a little bit of everything everywhere in Montalcino. But I want to say that it's probably the same for when we talk about Sangiovese in Tuscany, no? Because I don't know. Yeah. So you see, we were here. Montalcino is like this, like a light green pocket, and probably another main area very close to Montalcino is the area of Montepulciano, which is a smaller area, about a half of the acreage, and the soil they share some of the same origins, is mostly sedimentary with limestone, is slightly richer, and there is probably more homogeneity on the soils. And I want to say the wines, they go in general from kind of a lighter, fresh, approachable style to a little bit more kind of fleshier, more structured, kind of more similar to Montalcino. So there is a little bit of both in this region. And actually, I think a very exciting, fun region, but it's super young is at the beginning, is this yellow tongue of land in between Montalcino and Montepulciano, which is the Orcia, the Val d'Orcia area. It's a super young, it's basically probably younger than a teenager in the wine world. But the wines, they're very good, and are, as I said, they're being at the beginning, they're still like looking for their identity, but there are lots of young producers, and it's pretty exciting. I really look forward to see how Orcia will do in the future. And another, I want to say another main area for Sangiovese is the Chianti, in particular this red area, which is the Chianti Classico. Chianti Classico, compared to the rest of the Chianti, I don't want to discriminate, but it's probably an area where there is more, is a consistently higher in level. You can find high, great producer outside of the Chianti Classico, but the Chianti Classico is more consistent. And there, you can find wines like a little bit like Montepulciano. You can find light, approachable, acid-driven wines, but also you can find more serious wine more structured, a little bit more complex, and wine that are gonna age for a long time. Compared to Montalcino, not always has the same power. It tends to be, in general, a little bit more elegant. And what else? Scansano. Scansano is another important area for Sangiovese. Is closer to the sea, probably one of the closest where Sangiovese grow. And the wines, they are a little bit rounder, more approachable, more fruitier. They don't have kind of the tension, the friction that sometimes Chianti or Montepulciano have, or the structure, the Montalcino. They are more like everyday wines. They're more approachable, but they're also there. They're like great producers doing great things. So in general, they are like easier wines. Probably another area very interesting but super tiny for Sangiovese is the Carmignano area, which, if I'm not wrong, has been the first DOC for Tuscany, and it's one of the oldest area of viticulture in Tuscany, given the fact that I was, I think Cosimo III de' Medici, he had his nursery in that kind of a hillside, and because of the Medici family, there we had also historically like French varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. So I think it has to be at least 50% Sangiovese and the rest in between Cabernet Sauvignon, Franc and other variety. So it's kind of an ancient version of the Super Tuscan. And given the fact that they use like these international varieties blended with Sangiovese, the wine is more harmonious earlier. It's more approachable, a little bit more structured. It doesn't have probably all the facets of the Sangiovese and all these like corners and like the way the Sangiovese to express the land. But at the same time, is a great wine, very complex, and I think very, very good with food. Actually, that now Leslie is gonna illustrate. And actually, I saw her presentation earlier, and I'm super starving. I don't know if I'll be able to wait 15 minutes more.
It's good. This is just before lunch. So everyone can.
So yeah, thank you, and I leave the lead to Leslie.
Grazie, thank
I don't
you,
know, Anna Maria,
David.
if you want to say
Yeah, no. Can you please just interrupt your screen sharing? So I will give the word to. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. So Leslie, I'm gonna pin you now. Yes, here we are. Grazie mille, David.
Okay, so does everyone see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. That was so in-depth and lovely, and I'm really excited that California now, and specifically Napa Valley, has that connection to Tuscany, which is actually my first home when I lived in Italy. So so I'm going to talk about food, but first just set it up a little bit with some context. And I'll share with you a little bit of a recent trip I took to Tuscany, and my group went to Montalcino. It was beautiful time in Tuscany in the autumn. It was just a bit after harvest, but all of the vineyards were changing color, and it's just a gorgeous time to go. And of course, the town was really lovely, walking around Montalcino. So this is, I just wanted to remind everyone that while we love talking about Italy as a unified country, it's also, very, the regions are very proud, and they also have very particular histories. from broader swaths from the north to the south, but also the particular region. So I just are showing here the topographic map. So you're reminded again of where the mountains lie. The map on the right is the different wine regions, the viticultural regions. So you can see where those are placed on the map. And then that also corresponds to the cuisine, of course, because where there are vineyards, that tends to be perfect growing conditions also for various produce, for animals. So this is again just a recap of Tuscany with the different DOC, DOCG areas. So you can see it's quite active in its wine production. And then just a few points as we go through the presentation, things to keep in mind. So instead of referring to Italian food, we should change our mindset and think more in terms of regional food. Because again, it really is, every region has their traditional dishes. And there's the saying that I love, what grows together goes together. And so certainly the regional dishes, the wines that accompany them that are grown there are made to be together. We also, I'll show you in the next slide, Tuscany's topography. We have to think of its Mediterranean climate. David did a great job with the geographic position. So with his fun facts between Napa Valley and Montalcino, we could see where that was placed. And another thing to think about as we're going through the presentation is cucina povera, which basically is peasant cuisine, peasant food. So thinking of Tuscany not as the grand tourist loved region of Italy, but as a region that was agricultural and so very poor for many, many, many years. And so the traditions that grew up, in the centuries were ones of using every part of the animal, of finding ways to use stale bread, to the vegetables, the beans, very, very simple ingredients. But throughout the centuries, the Tuscans were able to, with different herbs, with their incredible olive oil, with very few spices, actually, they were able to make things very flavorful. And then the last thing I'll touch upon for some of the slides is, as David already mentioned them, but the Medici, so a really important ruling family based out of Florence, and had a huge part also in the Renaissance, and as it turns out, also with the cuisine of the region. So I've structured it. Oh, yeah, this is the map. So just to show you again, the Apennines, and you can see there's just these lovely hills. There's also some, valleys, flatlands, where it's just perfect for growing conditions for a lot of, vegetables, vineyards, obviously. Up in the mountain area, it's more where you find your mushrooms and truffles, which we'll get into. You have the long coastline, which also provides Tuscany with, with fish as well. I've broken it up basically in a Tuscan menu. So we each get to choose a dish from each of the slides. But I'm just going to paint some broad, brushstrokes in terms of the Tuscan cuisine, because you can really do a deep dive. Even the particular provinces in Tuscany also have traditional recipes. So Pisa's different from Florence's, or different from the Maremma. And so these are kind of the classic ones that you'll find across the region. So affettati misti, so these are mixed cold cuts, and you can see in this image next to the list, it's a kind of a nice cross section. But you have this various salumi, and salami. So salumi are particular cuts of meat. Salami are instead, grounded up parts of meat with spices, etc. The finocchiona is one of the favorites in Florence. It has wild fennel seeds mixed in. Salsiccia you'll find on these mixed plates either raw or cooked, and the biroldo that I have there in parentheses is a blood sausage. And pecorino cheese is the cheese that you find throughout Tuscany. And Pienza is perhaps, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Montalcino, is it perhaps where it's most famous, but they really do make it throughout the region. And then, and that's sheep milk cheese. Crostini, so you have grilled bread, so very, one of the most simple ingredients that you can have. They will grill it or toast it with olive oil, garlic, and then add certain things to it. So in this photo, for example, you see the fegato, the chicken liver. You'll also see porcini when it's porcini season, and really just anything. And then bruschetta are, of course, the traditional, the tomato with the olive oil and garlic, which we all love, I'm sure. So some of the major antipasti. And here another little spread for you to see. This is basically what you have every lunch. Okay, so then kind of in between the antipasti, the appetizers, and your first course, you have also various soups and salads, because they're mostly bread, beans. So ribollita, which means reboiled, is just to show you again, cucina povera in Tuscany. So it was essentially minestrone soup that they would reboil with some of the dried bread, couple day old bread, and it made it very hearty actually. And ribollita has kale and the cannellini beans and the broth, etc. Papa do pomodoro, so this is also something that's essentially bread and tomato, but really hearty and delicious and super full of flavor. Panzanella, which is actually in the last, you could see it in the last slide, but it's another way to use up old bread, so try it at home. You chop the bread up into little cubes, and then you can add different vegetables, and then of course you add olive oil and different simple spices, and yeah, just a lot of vegetables, essentially tomato. And then fagioli al uccelletto, which is a particular dish, but it's just, again, those simple white beans, some red or some tomato sauce, olive oil. So very simple, not many ingredients, but making this big flavor. And here's panzanella. So you have it here too, the fagioli up on the top. And Tuscans were called by other regions mangia fagioli. So they were the bean eaters, which is really fun. And then ribollita is on the bottom right. So you can see, it's essentially vegetable soup, but really hearty looking. So now we get into primi, which maybe is everyone's favorite, really, their favorite of all the dishes. So this is where we get to see a lot of the different game. We're starting to see some of the meats come into play, and then some of the vegetables as well. So pici, which is a very thick spaghetti, you'll see in the next slide. You find a lot in the province of Siena. So that's where Montalcino is, Montalcino and Montepulciano as well. and picia ragu, so different meat ragus, including wild boar, but also beef. Al aglione, so this is a bigger garlic. It has a much softer, less pungent flavor, and served with tomato sauce. Tagliatelle al tartufo, so again, because the Tuscany is bordered by the Apennine Mountains and does have a couple other little mountains throughout, you do find truffles in Tuscany. Here, these are the black ones. Pappardelle alla lepre, so hare, wild hare, or cinghiale, boar. And this year, Davide, I don't know if you've heard this, but because of the pandemic, the hunter, really people weren't able to leave their house. So hunters were not able to go, catch wild boar. So there's a huge wild boar population. It's kind of wreaking havoc, but so everyone has to eat some cinghiale to help save Tuscany. And then crespale, so these are essentially like a crepe that are stuffed with ricotta and spinach. And this is already where I can mention, I've mentioned the Medicis before, but Catherine Medici, who at the age of 14 was married to Henry II in France. She decided that she could not go without her entire kitchen staff. So all the different chefs, etc., came with her. She demanded that the cuisine and the habits of the Tuscan culture were brought with her. So she actually brought some recipes, including essentially an onion soup that we all know France now does really well. Crespale, so here we have crepes, which again, France is known for. And then also there was a kind of Renaissance Tuscan dish with duck, which was prepared with orange and some different spices. And that is another thing that you see in French cuisine. She also apparently brought the fork, because it really wasn't something that many people used. It was a lot of this food, you could, maybe not the pastas, but a lot of it was kind of finger food, roasted meats and vegetables and things. And so she actually brought the fork over to France as well. And then nudi. So this you find more in kind of the southwest of Tuscany, but it's essentially a pasta-less ravioli. So it's just the kind of ricotta filling, ricotta and spinach filling. So here, the main picture, this is a pappardelle alle lepre. And then you have the pici, so that really thick spaghetti up on the right, and the crespelle in the bottom right. Which one do you guys want? So then secondi.
Everything.
Everything, yeah. So secondi, of course, and if we're going to talk about King Brunello Di Montoccino as the Tuscan wine, the most famous wine, the most kind of structured and important wine of Tuscany, then we have to pair it with the Bistika Fiorentina, because this is the king of the meat in Tuscany. So it's a T-bone steak. It's very thick. They grill it, really there's no spices. It's just salt, olive oil, maybe a little sprig, as you see of rosemary here, but it's very, very rustic, but super flavorful, very good. And they do other mixed roast meats. You'll see that in the next slide. That's quite typical, as well as a lot of game. So there's a lot of, there's a lot to be hunted in Tuscany. There are still some forests left. Not all of them have been, taken out for vineyard purposes, but you'll find cinghiale again. That's on pretty much every menu in Tuscany. Venison and hare, as well as some of the duck and pheasant, etc. And then going back to cucina povera, we also see that in Tuscany, some of the kind of street food, if you will, although they prepare it in different ways, but You'll see trippa and lapredotto, so that, again, using all parts of the animal that they could, between the, the salami, the salumi, the different cuts of meat to, to really cook certain types of cuts that you would stew, but they really would use everything. And that still is, the case today. So here, yeah, exactly, more roasted meats. You see the lampredotto panino, which is, you'll see that a lot in Florence, street vendors. And then cinghiale in umido, so like a nice kind of stewed cinghiale on the upper right. And then if we have room, we get to have a dolce. So these are classic Tuscan dolci. Probably the most important and classic is contucci. So these almond biscotti that are dry, that you dip into vin santo, which is known as a hay wine, but it's a dessert wine, so it is sweet, that you, it's created by leaving the grapes out to dry, and then they're vinified, so they have a lot of sugar. And this wine, it's usually very complex. Some of the better producers don't put it on the market for at least 5 years. You can find them younger, but they get better and better with age. And it's just something, yeah, really light and to have at the end of a meal. Then there's also a castagnacho. So this is you'll see it in the next slide, a chestnut flour cake with grapes and pine nuts. Panforte, the next two are more from Siena. So panforte is like a very dense fruit cake, essentially. Ricciarelli are these lovely moist almond biscuits. So a lot of Tuscan cookies are really dry. And you see this actually a little bit throughout Italy, but the ricciarelli are really beautiful and moist and flavorful. And then zuccotto, which is, you'll see it here, I'll just go to the next slide, up on the right. So it's kind of like a zuppa inglese. Like it does have some nice cake that you form into this semicircle or a hemisphere, and you also will put sometimes cream and gelato. It's basically like half frozen, and you can let it thaw out before you serve it. And then the ricciarelli are in the bottom right, and this is the castagnacho that you see in the main picture. It also has some rosemary, so it has a nice savory and sweet mix. And that's it. And I have created, if you're interested, if you're going to Montalcino soon, or you just want to know some of the nice producers that you might want to try if you're wanting to delve into Brunello Di Montoccino, I've put together a little guide for those interested. And it has wineries, it has some of my favorite restaurants and sites to see in Montalcino, and a little bit more about Montalcino. So if you just, you can send me an email, leslie@ladolcevigna.com. And if you have any questions about the presentation, but if you do send me an email, I'll send you the PDF of this and you can print it out at home. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Thank you very much, David. Just checking if there are some questions from the public to you. I can't see any question right now, probably because people is very hungry like I am, and here is lunchtime. Sorry, Leslie, can you please remove just for a moment the screen sharing? Thank you very, very much. So if there are no questions, I would like to thank you very, very much for being here with us today and let us dream about Tuscany and Napa, of course. And we're very, very happy to celebrate this twinning between Napa and Montalcino. And I also would like to remind our public that this week is the week of the Italian cuisine in the world. And so we will have another webinar tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with Future Food Institute from Italy. And the guests will be Michelle Sisson from Appeal Sciences, Pietro Jonathan Bonanno, Italian Community Services, and Greg Drescher from the Culinary Institute in America. And so please be with us, and the theme will be the food of the future, sustainability and innovation. And you can also follow our free cooking classes, Italy by Pasta, every day starting from yesterday until Friday. We will offer a very short video on how to make an Italian pasta recipe with our chef Viola Buitoni on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much for following us. Buon appetito a tutti. Buon pranzo. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sergio Strozzi. Thank you to the Consul General of Italy, Fabio Ballerini, Vital Bagamicchi, and thanks to the Accademia Italiana della Cucina. Have a very nice day. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Buon
Grazie.
pranzo. Ci scrivono buon pranzo a tutti.
Buon appetito.
Sì, è vero, buon appetito.